this show Analog is a 3-month exhibit at Portico Gallery in Brentwood, Maryland, which is a space that is connected to a residence and also artist studios. However, as you'll see when we go through the space, it's very professional. And there is nothing to suggest that is anything but a top-notch gallery. And John Paradiso, who's the curator and manages the space and is on this call, has done an amazing job with the curation, the placement of the work. He's been absolutely phenomenal. So John, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for everything that you've done for me throughout the 3-month run of this show. And in the run up to that, I am indebted to you, truly. And
My
very, very
pleasure.
grateful.
It's a
Thank you.
beautiful show.
Well, that's thanks to you. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And John is a fabulous artist himself. There he is right down the hall from me in his studio, creating amazing fabric and photographic based collages. John, if you want to say a little something about your work, please jump in.
Well, let's maybe at the end or something, but I'm excited to walk through the studio, the gallery with you and listen to you talk about the work. I've been fortunate, to all the studios are off the gallery. My studio door opens onto the gallery. And so every day I get to come in and enjoy Adrian's work for the last 3 months and spend a lot of time with it. So I feel very fortunate. Such a nice show. And before COVID, we were doing 2, 3, 4-person shows so I could have larger emailing lists to get as many people in the gallery as possible. And our thinking is very different now. So I've switched to solo shows, and Adrian was our first solo show. And it is such an elegant show. I feel like we're a 57th Street Gallery or something. So it's been really fun. And we did have 2 mini artist receptions because we have a big portico that we can open up all the doors and move most of the socializing outside. And hopefully we'll start that back up in the spring, and it's very limited. So you should get on my mailing list. Adrian can talk maybe more about them if it comes up during her talk or at the end of the talk. We're only able to get 2 of the 4 in because of Prince George's COVID numbers, but they're very safe, and we managed to do it. And those 24 people had a really great time. So, because we limited it to 12 people at a time. But like I said, I'm really fortunate to work with such a fine artist, and we've really become, I think, good friends through this, and it's been really nice. And I love showing artists. So if you're an artist, I have an open call for work, and I put everyone on file. And so definitely send me a link to your website if you're ever interested in showing, so I can keep you in my files. So welcome to Portico, and Adrian, you can take it away.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much for that lovely intro. So what I had planned for this was to walk through and talk about certain works that are hanging here. I think first I should probably give you an overview of the gallery if you haven't seen it from the photos. And let me see if I could do that on my phone, if it's going to let me. No, it's not, because I'm recording. It's deciding that it doesn't want to reverse itself. So I am therefore going to turn around and give you a sort of little bit of a view of the gallery, and we're going to walk through. And I've actually brought with me today some of the elements that I've used in some of the pieces that are hanging here. So I'm going to go through quickly, and if you have any questions about a particular piece, the technique, or the inspiration, or comments, anything, please jump in. I don't want to be the only one talking. I'd love this to be an interactive thing, just like a real gallery talk would be, that people participate as you feel moved to. So I'm really glad that you're all here, and I'm going to get started now. So the first piece that I'm going to focus on is called Beehive, and I'm going to zoom in on it. right here. And each of these elements is made of 4 pieces, and it's got little millinery flower stamens attached to the bottom of each of them. And this piece was actually made from pieces that remained from a larger piece that I made. And I brought with me today some of the pieces here so you can get an idea of what went into them. This is actually, each of these things is 4 pieces. And the way that I work is I play with the pieces and I just kind of turn them around, and it sort of tells me what it wants to be. So you can see that the back I sort of taped together, and it's kind of flexible because just as loosely taped, just the 4 photo segments that are taped together. And lo and behold, it made a beehive, because when I saw this one, there's really nothing here. But when you put them together, it sort of turns into something more. And it's always that something more, that's something new, that's something interesting, different, exciting, dramatic, inspiring, that I'm always trying to do. So the next piece that I want to talk about is Double Cotillion, which is here. And that is actually also the postcard for the show. And I brought with me a couple of the pieces from that. I've gotten a lot of comments on this. This was actually in a gallery in Denver a couple of years ago, and the dealer in that gallery told me that a visitor came in and looked at the piece and swore up and down that it was made by digital means. And I laughed at that because to me it's so obvious, because parts of and I'll show you now, parts of the piece are very obviously casting shadows onto the substrate. So here is a piece, and you can see sort of the light shining through. Here's one of the many pieces that went into making that. I think there are about 16 or 20 pieces that go into it. And this was really fun because I was like, well, how small can I make the cuts? And how tiny can I make the holes? And how detailed can I get? So this was really fun and really, really challenging to execute. And I've actually, because I've got pieces left over, I was playing around and I said, oh, look, if I cut off something, I've got something new and different. And maybe I've got this little piece that I can do something else different with. So it's really, I'm just playing, which I'm so thrilled that as an artist, I have the luxury of playing, because to me, when I do this, it doesn't feel like work. It feels like play. And I hope that all of you, because I know most people here are artists in some capacity, I hope that you all kind of share that experience. And I'm glad to be sharing it with you all today. So the next one I want to talk about, and since I can't reverse the screen, I'm going to do, oh, thank you, Dana, is Matrix Retrograde. And let's see if I can sort of get a little bit of a better shot on it. Trying to sort of fly blind here. Okay, there we go. So, sort of, this is hanging, or rather, this is a collage made of 16 individual prints of lights that were reflected through 2 sets of windows. I was in a retail store on the ground level, and it had fluorescent lights in it, and it also had spotlights on the ceiling. So I looked through the window. This is one of those instances where I looked through the window and I saw this there. I saw this reflection, and I thought, oh, it really doesn't make sense to take this shot because it's not going to come out well. It's going to be so muddy. And then I said, come on, it's a couple of frames of film. Let me just try it. And so, to my happy surprise and amazement and pleasure, when I printed them in the darkroom, they came out great. And of course, I had to futz a little with the exposure to get it precisely the way that I wanted it to look, to have the darkness and the drama, and also get a sufficient level of detail. So that being said, I think I perhaps should back up a little bit and talk about this series and this process and how I came to it and what it is. 20 years ago, I moved from a full-time New York existence to Maryland on a part-time basis. And when I was in New York, I had a share in a rental darkroom in the remnants of the photo district when there were still remnants to be had. And I said, oh, wow, when I go to Maryland, I don't know what's going to happen. How am I going to find a private rental darkroom situation? So when I was printing a few months before I moved to Maryland, I was printing this one image and I got this light bulb overhead moment because I had been doing hand cut paper collage since I'm about probably 7 or 8, I think. And I got this light bulb overhead moment and I said, oh, that's what I'm going to do when I get down there. I'm going to make photo collages if I can't find a dark room for some time. And it took years. I really didn't find anything that was suitable. So I ended up buying equipment from someone going digital, and I have my own dark room now for most of those years. So I spent my last few months up in New York printing many multiples of images. And that was what I worked on when I got to Maryland. So I would at least be able to do some sort of art. So this was a very new thing to me. And it ultimately went from the thing to do in the meantime while I was looking for a dark room to the thing that is my mainstay for the past 20 years. The more I did it, and I started showing them to people, and everybody loved them, and I loved it, and I just hit on something new. So it was a very happy occurrence. And as someone who visited my studio last year said, so if you didn't move to Maryland, you never would have started this series. And that just smacked me up the side of the head because I never thought of it that way. And it is so, so true. So it's just a little bit of a life lesson there about how making lemonade from lemons and how change can be a positive thing and we can use it for good, because it was quite a wrenching experience. So I'm going to proceed through the gallery. And actually, there are a couple of small pieces here. I'm just looking at the time that someone has texted me. Okay, that I wanted to talk about because I brought pieces of them to show you. So this piece here is called Beacon. And this one actually harks back to my old childhood collage days. And I'm going to try and zoom in because right in the center of it is a tiny little paper cutout of a mirror from a design catalog. And if I zoom out, you can see what it actually is. And it's actually quite simple. There are 4 pieces there. And there are 2 pieces that are sort of 3-dimensional. On the corners, you can see a little bit of shadow there. Oh, someone else is coming in. Hi, Margaret, welcome. So when I did this, I shot this photograph many, many years ago. I think I may have even made these prints when I was in New York, because I've got boxes and boxes and boxes of prints over the years, because for those of you who know me, I start out by shooting film, which I then hand process in small tanks. And then I make multiple prints in the darkroom, which I hand cut and assemble into these photo collages. So I'm pretty sure these prints I made when I was in New York. And I found when I was looking around the original print that I made, I'm going to go away from the outside so you can sort of see it. So this was just a really random cut out of this print, which I see it's very dark because the camera, the phone rather, is trying to compensate for the light, so I'll move it out. But you can see down at the bottom here, there's a little bit of building detail of the layers of buildings. I think I was probably standing on the street somewhere and just looking at the urban landscape, and I saw this building that was just shining at me. Another one that I brought many pieces of is right next to it. This is called Evening Star. And I just made this last year. And I'm going to do my best to zoom in because I can't see because my phone is not reversing for some fun reason. So these are quite
It
simply
looks good.
brooches. Thank you. Thank you, John. These are quite simply brooches that I saw in the window. One of the things that I've done for many, many years is I'll go to 57th Street and I'll go to Harry Winston and I'll go to all these high-end jewelry stores and I'll photograph jewelry through the window. So I'm going to try and point this down so you can see. No, it's not going to work, so I'm just going to hold it up. I've got many, many of these brooches, these prints that I made, and I know I made these probably 25 years ago, these little tiny prints of the brooches. I made them in 2 sizes, and I just cut them up, and I'm going to try once again. There we go, to point it downwards at the, no, my phone's not cooperating. Okay, well, so basically what I do, and here's a little smaller one, and this was sort of another case of how small and detailed can I make the cuts, and what sort of pieces can I get out of them. So let's see what else we've got here. Oh, these are actually 2 interesting pieces that I want to talk a little about. The first one is Forest for the Trees, and the second one is Life in Baroque Times. And these 2 were actually also made from pieces that remained from several iterations of collage. So I had these partial prints left over, and I looked at them and I go, wow, these shapes, these dimensions, what's left, what's remaining here is so interesting. I want to see if I could do anything with that. So Forest for the Trees, which is here, is pretty simple composition. I'm going to zoom into it so you can get a sense of the detail. So it's just very lightly layered. And also there are some segments like right here. I'm trying to find my finger here. There we go, where there's a little bit of shadow because the print section is not glued down all the way to the substrate. And I always try to do that if I can, if the image and the composition will allow it. And Life in Baroque Times was also sort of part of the same. And I apologize for the crookedness and for the glare and for the color change that my phone is doing. But these were all freehand, hand cut. Each of these sort of lozenge shapes, if you want to call them that, are made of 2 individual pieces. And again, I've got them where there's a little bit of places where the little points stand up above the surface of the substrate. Again, this was just remaining after doing a very complicated piece with a lot of curvaceous parts, and I saw what was left over and I said, oh my God, this is just amazing. So it was really a lot of fun. So Evolution from 2017. This is the cartouche again that I showed earlier. That's the invite card piece. And this is actually the first set of prints that I made. And these are much larger. You can see here's the small one and here are the large ones. So there's quite of a size difference. And when I made these prints, I liked them so much that I thought, oh, I'm going to make a bunch more prints, but just in smaller scale. So that was what I did. And it's just, you know, again, very organic. So I'm going to walk down to the next place that I left a piece. And this is Lights in the Window from a couple of years ago. and I'm going to zoom into this. And this was a hotel that I took a tour of somewhere in Times Square. If I went to my notes, I could probably find it because I take pretty good notes. I've learned that over the years that it's important because you always know the one that I neglected to take notes, someone's going to ask me, oh, where was that? So I've learned that I need to take really comprehensive notes. So this was just a light fixture grouping in a hotel. I was sitting on a sofa and it was really interesting to me. Something about it was really beautiful. I love shooting lighting fixtures. I still have yet to figure out why, but I do. And so when I made them, this was actually kind of challenging because it seemed like by themselves they didn't really need much else. And how was I going to arrange them? So here's actually one of the sections that I used, or that actually left over an extra one that I did not use. And let's see, I'm holding it upside down. So you see, it's very simple. And I just cut out all the lights. There wasn't much complex cutting going on here. And this was one of the ones that I felt would look best as a flat arrangement so that nothing really sticks up from the surface of it and casts shadows, because I thought that this image by itself was enough, that it didn't need anything more, and it was perfect as it was. So again, many multiple prints, and only use some of them, and perhaps in the future I will cut away some of those individual lights and use them in something else. It's possible, or maybe not, or maybe I will 10 or 20 years from now, who knows. So let's just see. The next one that I want to talk about is this one. This is one of the few color pieces that I did, and the color actually comes from the background of the piece, not from the piece itself. This was a poster in a apartment window, actually, and I shot this many years ago in Chelsea, which is the gallery district in New York. Probably most people here know that, but a few people might not be aware. And so it was a Marilyn Monroe. It was after a Marilyn Monroe movie poster, which I didn't find out until very recently, actually. Even though this is from a couple of years ago. And at the time that I made this in 2018, I was going through a really difficult time emotionally. I was trying to figure things out, and I was feeling very stuck and very trapped. And so I made this, and I felt as though it really, truly reflected how I was feeling at that time. And I think that's why I used the red background. So I actually brought with me, I found in this box, because I keep everything that I've ever cut out, no matter how old. So I have some of the cutouts here. Let me actually go to a blank white wall space. Here's one of the cutouts. And oh, actually, I see that maybe there's a collage to be here, because I like the way this kind of wiggles around and casts a shadow. And so here is what I cut away when I made that collage. So this would actually possibly do something else different and interesting, perhaps about self, identity, things of that nature. So I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that really sticks out to me. I think there's one other piece that I'd like to talk specifically about, and then I'll open it up if anyone has any comments or questions, because I really don't want to be the only one talking here. If anyone has anything to say, I'd love to hear it. So the next one I'm going to explain a little bit about before I show it to you. It's called Goodbye to All That. And this is a piece that has a lot of story behind it. I made it in 2016 originally, and it was a very simple composition. And for a number of reasons, I didn't finish it at that time, but I put it aside. And at the beginning of 2020, in about January, February, before the pandemic hit, I pulled it out and it just felt like the right time to work on it. I mean, again, sort of going back to this being a very organic process for me, a process of feeling inspired by something or not, and so putting it away for later. So 4 years later, this is probably the longest piece I've ever worked on, I think. 4 years later, I came back to it. And at the time, I didn't know the pandemic was coming. It was too early for me to be aware of that yet. But at the time, I was sort of coming out of a very, very difficult emotional period of my life. And I felt like I was saying goodbye to certain things, certain aspects of the way that I looked at things, the way that I felt about things, the way that I reacted to things. And I felt as though I was slowly, slowly, slowly starting to enter a period of my life where there was room for expansiveness and new ways of looking at things and a new level of maturity, or so I hoped. However, there was still that looking back aspect of, oh, those old, fun, and granted somewhat self destructive behaviors and activities of saying goodbye to them. So there's a whole lot in this piece. And I actually only discovered that the photographic aspects of it are from a store window with a big, beautiful spiral staircase on Fifth Avenue around 54th Street. And I saw that in a window in a video rather that someone did driving around New York when it was all boarded up in about April or May, I think. And I was like, oh my gosh, there it is. So I'll show it to you now. And this is the piece, the whole piece. And I'm going to zoom in to individual parts. So you see these photographs, my husband calls them lemon slices. Uh, and I guess they perhaps look like that. So I really decided that I wanted to embellish this quite a lot. So in the middle, what we're looking at here is a painted wood medallion, and it's embedded with glass beads, Swarovski crystals, sequins, and right below it, I've got some vintage beads that I bought at a store that is no longer in existence. Down at the bottom, I've got a seashell, and there are actually, if you look at these black round beads, those are, oh my gosh, now it just went right out of my head. There's a very precious type of bead that is used, and I apologize for the reflection because there's a window behind me. So, and right up on the top is the magazine cutout. So again, harkening back sort of to my old mixed media cut paper collage days of childhood. And right here, you see there are these tiny red beads that are kind of perched on the little corner tip of each of these print sections. So this was very, very challenging to assemble in a way that it stayed, because there are so many incrustations on it and layers of incrustations. I had to experiment with a lot of glues and adhesives, and it actually took some time for me to get it so that everything stayed in place, because this was a first for me to do this level of layers of incrustation. So I think I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to open it up if anyone has any comments, any questions, anything at all. Please feel free.
Gorgeous. Gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I love it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
The last one especially, really, really amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Beautiful work, Adrienne.
Thank you.
Thank you for showing us around. I have a question about your process.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about kind of what your day looks like? I mean, do you work on a piece for hours on, or do you just kind of do 5 minutes here and then it takes 4 years? Or like, how do you get engaged with the piece?
That's a really great question, Martina. Thank you for asking. It all starts with the shooting of the film. And very often, and actually, I should back up a little and say that pretty much all of what I do is images of New York and inspired by New York, because to me it's a very exciting place. I'm an architecture geek and I love the architecture there. It makes me feel interested and excited just walking around. So it will start by me going out to shoot the film. And sometimes it might take me months until I have the time to actually go in the darkroom and process the film that I have shot. So it could be a week later, it could be 6 months later, or 2 years. I mean, I had a broken foot 5 years ago and I had film backed up and, darkroom work backed up for years. But I try to be a little more efficient than that. So there's first the film processing. And then when I look at the negatives, I decide what I want to print and I make a bunch of prints. And thanks, Bernard. I will answer that next. Thank you. So I'll make the prints, and again, it might take me a long time. I mean, right now, I'm looking back at negatives from the 90s and the 2000s that I haven't looked at for a long, long time. So it's that part is so variable. So I'll make the prints, and which is its own process, because it's not just printing them, it's then there is a 2-bath chemical process that I go through to actually make it so that the prints are protected from environmental pollutants and light and things like that. Thank you, Margaret. So it might, again, I might be so excited and I might have time right then that I can begin to actually work on the collage within a week after the prints are done and dry. Or sometimes, again, I might put them away in a box and it might take me 10 years. So, hey, Dana, thank you so much. So, so it's so variable. Does that kind of answer? Yeah?
Yeah, it does. Great. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
thank
Yeah,
you
cool.
for asking.
Sure.
So Bernard, you are actually on target. I do use an X-Acto knife. I've learned over the years, I've actually experimented with a swivel blade knife and I'm just too klutzy for that. I'm just, it just doesn't work for me. So I'll very often only use the very tip of the knife, or sometimes when I hold it, I'll hold it so that it's kind of canted and the backing paper, the white reverse part of the photograph, will not show. That's kind of always what I'm after, is to try and hide that if I can, but it's always done with an X-Acto knife. Thank you, Myra. Thank you, dear, so much. So, so it's a very careful process. And as the years go on, I find that I need brighter lights and I have to take off my glasses in order to see what the hell I'm doing.
You're lucky.
What's that?
I said, you're lucky. I have to keep getting stronger glasses to do my up close work.
Oh dear. Well, oh my God, Lisa and Jim, it's so great to see you guys.
It's great to see you, and I really enjoyed this. And it's so interesting because it's been years since I've seen a body of your work. And I work with tile and tessellations and cutting out tiny pieces to make mosaics. And your process reminds me so much of what I'm familiar with in my studio. And I love how you've brought, well, actually the way you described how even the leftovers are really interesting, and you can see them anew, and then you can kind of push off from that into new directions, so that everything you've done in the past is folded into what you're doing in the present and in the future. Yes. And I also really love how you've been adding that shadow. I don't know that I remember that from years ago along the edges, but that kind of gives that lift and letting the light play on them. and then these incrustations, the building up of dimension with other materials too. It's really fascinating to see your development. You know,
Thank
they're
you.
beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's an interesting thing that you say, because it has been a long time since we've seen each other and since we've seen each other's work. So basically that's been a part of the discovery in the process for me as well, because in the beginning my objective was to get everything flat. I don't
Yep.
know, I was channeling Clement Greenberg or who the hell knows what, but
Working with
you know,
paper,
I
so
felt
that's
that
good.
everything needed to be really flat. And so it took me some time to figure out that the only way to do that was with heat, like a dry mount press or a tacking iron. But then over the years, after I kind of perfected that, I was like, okay, well, what's next here? So I decided I was going to stop.
Step back a little bit.
Oh, thank you so much, John. John is amazing. So I basically decided that I was going to sort of stop fighting the materials, and I was going to allow the natural characteristic curve of photo paper, which has emulsion on the front but not on the back side,
Right.
to in certain cases dictate what I was going to do. Thank you. I'm going to grab this back. So actually, here's one of my most three-dimensional pieces. This is Bouquet of Lights, 2013 to 14. And it's just a very quotidian light fixture. I was in a restaurant with friends having a meal, and I saw the light fixture. It was just a typical coffee shop, nothing special type of light fixture, but something about it. I said, there's something there. So I made these prints, and I decided I wasn't going to flatten them to within an inch of their life. I was going to allow the curvature to do its thing. So that's kind of what I've done, and you can see the deep shadows that are
really did
cast.
see that. Yes.
And basically all throughout, there are areas where parts of it are raised above other parts. You can see some of the little secondary and tertiary shadows here. So I like to think, allowed for experimentation and sort of not trying to force the materials to do my bidding, but for me to sort of be the channel or the mechanism by which they come into being.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm actually.
I love too how you said that, like, it starts, I mean, I was making notes as you were talking, but that as you're traveling through the city, you're feeling excited. You have this response to the architectural detail, the lighting, and then you're capturing it through these processes that go through so many transformations, and then curating and putting them together in different ways. And but that original excitement is still there. You know,
oh, so much so. Yeah, and this all started, actually, there's even history about this series that goes even further back. In the very early days, the early aughts, I guess it was very, very late 90s, early aughts, the West Chelsea Arts District started to develop. And at the time, there were very few galleries there. And it was an outpost, and it was inconvenient to get to because you had to walk 2 avenues from the closest subway station and all of this. And it was a big pain. But I kept going as more and more galleries were there. And so I started to see the architectural development. And I also started to really become an aficionado of the art scene because I had been relatively isolated up until then. So I started to feel like, wow, you know, I'm really outside of this scene. Here are all these, you know, sort of castles of art commerce with their polished cement floors and their white walls and track lights and all this stuff that kind of, when you go in, it makes you feel a little bit like, oh, I don't belong here. So it all started from a kind of not such a great place. And so I just kept photographing and documenting all of that because I'm at heart a documentarian. And so I started documenting all of that. And it was actually from that series again, when I first moved, just before I moved to Maryland, that this whole series came out. So a lot of these images, these urban landscape images that I've used in some of the earlier pieces in this series, come from just documentary photographs that I took of that West Chelsea Arts District over the course of its development over like 10 or 15 years.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Hmm.
So we're almost at 45 minutes. You know, if anyone has anything else that they want to say or they want to ask, or if you just want me to, you know, sort of do my best with the uncooperative phone that won't reverse itself. I did test this at home. And however, I wasn't recording. And when I tested it at home, it worked fine. And now it decides it doesn't want to work. So whatever.
Mhm.
Thank you, Martina. Thank you. So, unless you know you have more questions or comments or whatever, John, do you want to?
Well, I wanted to say that all the work is on your website as well, so you can get the real detailed look at it there, to go back if there was one you wanted to see clearer. And we have a lot of the shots on our website, which is portico3807.com
Portico.
and 3807.com. And that's a way you can get on my mailing list as well. And I'll let you know, I don't send out a lot of emails, so you won't be bombarded, but you know, feel free to get off at any time too. But that's how you'll know when we're having different events at the gallery or how to submit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
What are we looking at behind you?
It's a paper quilt, collage quilt, and a headboard that I've carved into. And then there's a second one, and I cut up fabric and make these sort of modern quilt-like pieces because they're really not quilts. And I'm working on one now, so.
I see. So there's a real affinity between what you're doing and what Adrian's doing, but with different.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I used to be a photographer, and went to school for photography and did a lot of darkroom work and had dark rooms in a lot of my studios. I've just sort of moved out of that, and now I'm just using other imagery.
Interesting. Okay. Well, this is really amazing.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you so much. This has been just so lovely. It's been, again, I want to thank John from the bottom of my heart. I'm so in love with this show, and I'm so happy and thrilled and honored to be showing here. He's an amazing curator, and he really has gone the extra mile in every way imaginable. I have to honestly say that this is probably the first time in my life that I've had a show somewhere that I've really not felt like a beggar, because unfortunately in the art world, a lot of what goes on, the sort of inherent environment, is that way that, oh, we're artists and there's so many of us and we're used to not being valued in terms of monetary remuneration, or, you know, maybe not having our work hung the best way or lit the best way or publicized sufficiently. But I mean, everything that I could have possibly wanted from a show, John did. And that's just like, I still can't take it in.
Feeling, yeah. So
Well,
it looks like a big, long place.
So yeah, so it's basically a extra wide hallway. It's about 7.5 feet wide by 100 feet long.
Wow.
There's 5 studios off it, and the door right behind Adrian, all the way down at the end of the hall, is an artist in residence space. It's a small room. And then we have the porch along the front and 3 sets of double doors that we can open up and really get great airflow during the pandemic. And I want to say that Portico is a resource for artists, and it's an amenity to this building. We put this in place so. Can you still hear me? Okay.
We put this in place.
So, because it's an arts district, and they built this new building 2 years ago, and so they wanted to have a art presence added. So we added 6 studios and the gallery, and it really gives me the opportunity, being an artist, to work with artists in the way that I'd want to be worked with, and build the relationships that I want to have. And the same with like the Washington Post, and they're really nice that they, Mark Jenkins comes out to every show, and I don't get a review for every show, but we got a beautiful review for this show. Took up half the page. It was really quite special. And I'm really happy because it gives Adrian that much more exposure. Which,
Adrian, how many pieces do you have hanging there? Looks like a lot.
Oh, yeah, 2, 4, 5. I'm just doing a quick 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, about 22 pieces here.
Wow.
And then there's also an amenity space on another floor, which we usually have sort of, artist events. But again, because of the pandemic, I've got, I think, about a half a dozen pieces there as well. So yes, it's a big show.
Really, that's lovely.
Really big show.
Yeah, although it's a narrow gallery, it's a big gallery. It's about 750 square feet.
Yeah. So I've got a lot of work here. My house and my studio is completely empty. The walls are bare now. Yeah.
I will say that the space upstairs where we have Adrian's sort of second show, the amenity space, I worked with the developer and we purchased about a little over $100,000 worth of original art from the neighborhood to put in that space. So people not only lived in an arts district, but lived around art. And I kept 3 walls blank that are really well lit, like the gallery. And I change that out every 3 to 4 months. And I give an honorarium to the artist, a humble honorarium. But that way I can show other people. I don't normally do the folks that are in the gallery as well upstairs, but I thought that would work out really well. And if we could have a live or in-person talk, depending on how the pandemic went, there would be work upstairs. So it wouldn't be like a talk upstairs and the work's in another floor. We'd have some work and then we could have walked people down individually. But the pandemic didn't cooperate. But it's great for the tenants because they see that the work is up there and it also says there's a bigger show downstairs. And I think that stuff might be on the website or on Instagram as well.
Okay, I'm going to definitely check out both of your websites. Adrian, tell me your website again. I mean, I know I've got a link to it, but.
Sure. It's pictureexhibit.com, the word picture and the word exhibit, but take out the extra E in the center. So it's all one word, pictureexhibit.com.
Okay, great. Thanks again.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else before we say goodbye? Anything? No? Okay, then. Well, I'm going to end the meeting, and I want to thank you so much, everyone, for coming today and for your presence, your comments, your questions, to see your faces, to read your messages. Thank you so much, Bernard. Can't wait to see you guys all in person after this insane crap is over. I look forward to getting out again, and it was so, so, so wonderful to see you all here. I really treasure you, and I thank you so much for coming. Okay?
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.